Hello, everybody, and welcome to the GoBundance Podcast. My name's Jamie Gruber. I'm your host, and today we had a breakthrough. We had our first GoBundance women's member join me in the podcast, Elaine Stodgaberg, and I had no idea that she had this incredible story and just how deep we would go in this interview. I mean, we talked about her upbringing, how she had to live with an aunt and uncle from the ages of 3 to 8, how she was emancipated legally from her family, from her father at the age of 16, how she then turned that into a career in the medical profession, which later pivoted to real estate. Talked about salt floats, how to overcome your ego, so many incredible topics. But more than anything, what I got from Elaine was a lot of emotion around her story, a lot of insights and moments in her life that served her, how quiet time away has really gotten her to a place of being able to truly figure out what she is clear on in life and what is supposed to happen next. I'm stammering a bit because it was an incredible interview. I can't wait for all of you to hear it. She is such a gift, not only to the GoBundance Women's Tribe, not only to GoBundance overall, but to all of us who are going to get to experience her message today and learn from her, from incredible experiences she's had through her entire life. So check it out. Hope you really enjoyed this interview. Make sure you like, subscribe, give us a comment. Let us know what you think about all of what Elaine talked about, your biggest takeaways. Drop them right down in the comments. But until then, enjoy this incredible interview with Elaine Stodgaberg. Elaine Stodgaberg, welcome.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much, Jamie. Excited to be here representing GoBundance Women.
That's right. You are the first, and I'm sure you'll be the best forever. It'll be immortalized as the best.
I don't know. It's an amazing group of women. I highly doubt I'm the best, but I'm happy to be here to pave the way.
I love it. Now I'm looking forward to getting more and more GoBundance Women members on this podcast. So let's start with a little backstory on you. Kind of give us the story of Elaine. Where are you from? What you came up through and where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much for having me here. I think GoBundance has been a fabulous organization to be a part of, and I love being in the women's tribe and seeing what the men's tribe has provided for my husband. And our kids are a little too young for Fambundance, but we look forward to that too as they get a little bit older. So in terms of introduction, I was born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And if I've noticed one theme in many of the folks in GoBundance, it's that many of us come from challenging backgrounds, and that certainly is part of my story. So my biological parents, unfortunately, both struggled with pretty severe substance use and mental health illness. I've never really known my mom for a number of reasons. And my father, unfortunately, died of a drug overdose when I was 25, right before I started medical school. And so his substance use was a big part of our growing up. But then we also had some really protective factors in there. So for a number of years, my brother and I lived with my aunt and uncle, my dad's brother and his wife. And that was really protective. We lived there in our very young childhood. I was ages 3 to 8. And we learned about love and doing the right thing and the value of education and going to the public library. We struggled with poverty, but we did not struggle with poverty of love or poverty of ideas. And I really credit those formative years with laying the foundation that allowed me to escape that generational poverty and the substance use and become the woman I am today. And kind of went on. I lived with my father for a while. He had a period of sobriety. Probably one of the biggest blessings of my life that I did get to have a relationship with my father, because he had a several year period of sobriety, and my brother and I lived with him and my stepmother for those years. And in a lot of ways, that was kind of a picture perfect childhood. We had a house with a pool, and Christmas was always fun. And we went to Disney World, and we went to amusement parks and those sorts of things. And then unfortunately, he had a relapse of his substance use that was much worse that second time around in my adolescence. I was legally emancipated when I was 16. I credit my father with recognizing that he was quite ill. And when I went to him at 15, we were in Pennsylvania, and the law is that you can be legally emancipated the week after your 16th birthday. And I said, Dad, this is my plan, and I need you to sign the papers. And he said yes. And that was challenging for both of us. But I think he knew that that was what I needed to break out of that cycle. And it actually allowed us to have a better relationship after that, because number one, I was living in my own place. So I lived in Section 8 housing. I paid $25 a month for rent. That's the minimum that someone can pay. I was in high school, so I had no income, but that's the minimum that someone can pay. But I still was able to see him, and to do so on an adult to adult level. So I was able to say, you're not allowed to come here if you're intoxicated. You're not allowed to talk about these things when you're here. You're not allowed to ask me for money, those sorts of things. And that allowed our relationship to be better in the last 10 years of his life. I put myself through college, had great people in high school and in college that helped me with things like even knowing how to apply to college or how to take the SAT or do those sorts of things. I've always been very fortunate that school came easy to me. And so that was, kind of a saving grace. Put myself through college. And then, things were always, even though I was living on my own and kind of doing a different life and with new people in a university setting, the relationship with my family was always quite challenging. And I had more of that sense that I had at age 15, 16, that I needed space away from these people. And so I moved from Pennsylvania to Oklahoma City. And part of that was I wanted to be so far away that I couldn't drive easily to them and they couldn't drive easily to me. And I wanted to be somewhere warm. It snows in Pittsburgh, and I had lived there for 20 years, and I was sick of the snow, although we'll get to a story of how I ended up in an even snowier place. So moved to Oklahoma City, and I worked for AmeriCorps for a year, which is like the Peace Corps, but domestically. I did HIV education there, and I really enjoyed that. Then I went to graduate school. I studied health administration and policy, so similar to an MBA, but with a healthcare focus. Met my husband. I'm sure we'll talk a great deal about that. Certainly the most pivotal change in my entire life is meeting my husband and having the pleasure of being married to him and raising a family with him. And then I went to medical school, and that was a very exciting journey. I think the important piece there is I had thought that people like me don't go to medical school, people who come from poor families or have struggled, that medical school was for rich families or for kind of a different kind of person. And I had a mentor in my life. I was actually working for her at the time. She was a pediatrician, Dr. Laura McGuinn. And she was the first person that really put into words for me that we can all become whoever we want to be. And a big part of that is surrounding ourselves by the people that we want to be like. And she just day in and day out would say, you work for me, you work with physicians every day. Why do you have this belief that you can't do this? Of course you can do it. You just need to let go of these old beliefs. And I listened to her, and it took about a year of her kind of working on me, but I listened to her and I applied to medical school. I had the pleasure of training at the University of Oklahoma. And then I came to Rochester, Minnesota. So for residency, I chose a psychiatry residency. I was very fortunate to match at the Mayo Clinic, often named the country's best hospital, the world's best hospital. A very great privilege to train there and to finish my psychiatry residency there. And kind of a weird twist of fate, my husband, Nick, was born and raised in Rochester, and then he left for Oklahoma, kind of a similar story, challenging upbringing, wanted to kind of go out as a young man and have his independence. And so he went to Oklahoma to be very far away from Minnesota. And then as fate would have it, we come back for the Mayo Clinic to do my training here. It's less of a surreal experience for me because I wasn't raised here, but he describes it as very surreal that we ended up back in Rochester. And then we had started some real estate investing in Oklahoma City. I'm sure we'll talk about that in this call here. But continued that real estate investing for a number of reasons, came to love Rochester as an investment market because of the growth that's happening here and the economic strength. Built a property management company, continued to build our own portfolio. Then we started working with other investors. when I finished my residency training, I actually dove headfirst into our business full time. And so at this time, I'm not practicing medicine. Nick and I are both running our company full time, which is not what we would have expected, 3, 5, 10 years ago. But that's been really great that we get to spend all day together growing this company. It's kind of like our fourth child in a lot of ways. And then we get to spend all evening, all weekends together raising our family. So we've been married for about 10 years now, and we have 3 children. And the good Lord willing, we'd like to have 1 or 2 more. We love chaos. We love the chaos that children bring. We had 3 German Shepherds when we met. I had 2, he had 1. So that was kind of the chaos that we had for the first season of our marriage, and they have all passed on. And now we have 3 children, and that's the chaos that we'll have for the next 30 years. And hopefully we'll have grandchildren and all of those things. And that's kind of my story in a 5-minute chunk there.
Smaller German Shepherds is what you have now. Smaller, maybe
Yes.
more active German Shepherds. So that's awesome.
Yes.
So
Yep.
let me go back a minute. You talked about proximity being a key teaching, if you will, of the first doctor that you started working with. But early in life, as you said, you didn't have that proximity. In fact, you had proximity to the exact opposite of what could be. And I know in my family, my upbringing wasn't as I don't know, trying, I guess you could say. But around me was a lot of that, cousins, aunts, uncles that went down a certain path, and all of the people that are like directly related, the kids of the whatever, they all went down that path as well, or many of them did. A few dragged themselves out. You dragged yourself out. But what do you credit that specifically, if anything? Is it just intervention from a higher being, or what? Like what made you decide that? I mean, emancipating yourself is huge in and of itself, but that I don't want that path. I want a different path. How did that come to be? Do you recall a moment, or was it just something in you that you always had, that you saw a better life for yourself?
Yeah, so I think you hit the nail on the head there of some sort of higher being. So I don't belong to any one particular religion, but I believe in things like God or the universe or some sort of divine energy or guidance. And certainly the older I get, the more I see that presence has always been there. And it's like a string that sort of pulls me forward. And the more I listen to it, the easier that pulling is. In terms of tangible things that have been provided to me, perhaps from that divine source, those years that my brother and I lived with my aunt and uncle, I was very young. So I moved in with them a few days before my 3rd birthday. My mother was out of the picture and my father was going to jail for a number of DUIs. And so we physically needed a place to live. We ended up living with them for 5 years. And, as a psychiatrist, I now know that 3 to 8 year span of my life, probably the equivalent of 20 years of growth, just because of how much we all grow in our young childhoods, and learning stability there. So there was no substance use there. There was a great deal of stability. They shielded my brother and I from a lot of the dysfunction in our larger family, and a focus on education and going to the library, and just that my brother and I were loved and that we were worthy and that we would become something someday. It was just written into me, like into stone, like that. Those lessons could never be unlearned because they were so strong at such a young age. And then I mentioned that I was blessed that school has always kind of come naturally to me. And so in those young years, I was able to get a great deal of love at home, and then also do well at school and enjoy that. And then in the later years, when I was living with my father and he was struggling with substance use, and the relationship with my stepmother was never that good, home life wasn't great, but school was really good. So I had, many hours per day where I was able to have guidance from other adults and just enjoy relationships with adults and see a path for the future there. And then I think, to my father's credit, although he himself struggled with substance use, I also knew that he loved me a great deal. And I was angry with him a lot of my childhood, I think, as any child would be when they want something from their parent that they're not getting for whatever reason. And obviously as an adult, I'm able to process it with a great deal more clarity than I was as a kid. As a kid, I was just mad, right? Like, why are you making these decisions? And I think because I had those formative years with my aunt and uncle at a very young age, I remember being, 8, 10, 12 years old, and like literally looking around the room and like saying to the adults, like, none of you are making good decisions, but I am going to make good decisions when I'm capable of doing it. Mm. And that protected me in a lot of ways. It created a lot of friction between my father and I. And I carried a lot of resentment for him. And then when I was, right before I started medical school, my husband and I went on a 2-week trip in Utah. And my husband and I had been married maybe about 8 or 9 months at that time. And we did a ton of hiking in these very remote areas in Utah where we were just by ourselves. And so even after, a number of hours hiking by ourselves, we weren't even talking to each other. And I had this like moment of supreme clarity that I was going to start medical school in a few weeks. And that there was something about that was so different than how I had envisioned my life as a child, that felt very like life defining to me. And I was in Capitol Reef State Park hiking in this kind of channel in a canyon. And I had this moment of supreme clarity that I was succeeding in life, not in spite of my father. I had carried that of like, oh, he couldn't make good decisions. He couldn't raise me right. I had to leave at 16. I'm going to show him I'm better than him. That was not the energy I needed to have. That I was having this growing amount of success in my life because of him. That because of his struggles, because despite the fact that he had been abused in childhood and he had had a very bad childhood, and the mental health resources and the schooling and stuff that was available to me in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s weren't available to him in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So he had a tough childhood and no resources. I had a tough childhood, but had a lot of resources, and that he loved me, and that I was able to start to see that he had an illness, and that I didn't have to succeed to spite him or to show him. I could succeed because of him, because he was able to give what he could to me. And that, although it was a rocky, bumpy path, it set me up for success in that early adulthood and in my marriage with my husband, and then, planning to go to medical school. And if I think about the times in life that I've been most in communication with the divine or the universe or whatever we want to call it, certainly the birth of my children is up there. But that moment in that canyon totally changed my life. And I had a plan. This was in 2012. Cell phones weren't nearly as good. We had like terrible cell phone reception the whole time we were in Utah. And I had a plan to go home and to tell my dad this like life-changing way of thinking, that our relationship didn't have to be so much friction anymore. And we came back from Utah on a Friday, and he died that Saturday.
Wow.
Yeah. I usually don't cry during interviews, but no. This is where it's at.
It got me a little choked up in the moment there too. So I'm looking down from my camera at the screen now because, oh, wow. Okay. Did you get a chance to tell him then?
I never did. And I think that was kind of exactly as it was meant to be.
Yeah.
And the last kind of correspondence that he had with me was he had called me while I was in Utah, and so I hadn't answered it. He had left a voicemail that, bless technology, I still have saved in my email. I had sent him this really beautiful canvas of a picture of he and I at my wedding, and he had just received it. And in this voicemail, he sounds very happy, and he says and he's like describing it to me. He's like, I just got this canvas in the mail. It's like as big as a television. Like, you're on the left. It's very cute. It's like he's describing it to me as though I have never seen it, even though I'm the one that like sent the gift to him.
Sure.
You're on the left and I'm on the right and I'm smiling and your hair looks so pretty. And so that was his last communication to me. And my last communication to him was kind of via the universe. I guess I just have to believe that he received that communication, even though he didn't hear it directly from my mouth. And kind of, I think your question was like, how was I able to kind of quote unquote make it despite a tough childhood? And I think, the theme there is love from caring adults, love for my parental figure, even though he struggled a lot, even though he had his own challenges.
Sure.
And then at the time that I was mature enough to feel it, a sense of forgiveness and a sense of he gave me everything he could, and perhaps I wanted more, but that's not the plan that the universe had for us, and that's totally okay.
It's interesting listening. I'm going to, at the risk of sounding like I know what I'm talking about in your chosen field before you left residency in psychiatry, but any person, whether they're struggling with demons, addiction, substance abuse, whatever it might be, that's willing to emancipate their child at the age of 16, that is one of the, and maybe it sounds a little backwards, but to me it sounds like, and you said it earlier, one of the ultimate expressions of love. That could not have been easy. So to your point about the universe delivering that message, maybe without you being able to verbalize it, it sounds as though he knew what you just had the epiphany of. I mean, he had to have known what you learned in that park with no cell phone connection, that moment of clarity that you had. He had that moment. He had to have. Otherwise, he probably wouldn't have emancipated you at 16. He knew that despite all that he was going through, life was happening for you, not to you. This relationship was happening for you, not to you. I say that not to psychoanalyze or anything like that, but more maybe just a human need on my part to say, I'm sure he knew, right? To put you at ease in some way, shape, or form, as much as I possibly can in this first encounter we have together. That it's just listening to the story you just gave. In my mind, it clicked like, yeah, but he knew. You know what I mean? That's kind of what came to my brain. Like, yeah, he knew. He had to have known. Otherwise, he wouldn't have done. It would have been all ego. No, you're not. You're my daughter. You're not emancipating yourself, right? So
right.
There's something there's a wisdom inherent in him that was masked. It sounds like by some of the struggles that he had, and that's powerful. That's really incredible. That however the timing was, like you said, it happened for whatever reason, and that seems to be the through line in your life. That all of this stuff happened for you, not to you. And that's a really powerful moment of clarity for you. So thank you for sharing that. That had to be tough. And I thank you for going through all of that.
Yeah.
Well, other thing I was saying, I'm always amazed. It's like a sobering reminder about those quiet moments. Whenever you take a minute to stop, go away to a field, to a park, just put the phone down or whatever, the most incredible things come to you. So have you implemented that? Do you do that often? Is that something you do in your life now? Is that something that you take, like kind of recognize like, wow, okay, let me hack that moment and repeat it. Just curious. Is that something that you do with any frequency now? Just sort of get quiet, get alone, get some space for yourself.
Yeah, you're absolutely right that it's a superpower that we all have, that we're born with. It's free. It takes our time, and that makes it the challenging part. Certainly growing up, or even 5 years ago, that would have sounded just repulsive to me. I wanted to be around other people. I wanted to go. I'm actually kind of an introvert, but I still like being around people. And then I just kind of need some quiet time to myself afterwards.
Sure.
But today, being a physician, a business owner, and a mother of 3, the quiet time is the most valuable thing I have. And so I've implemented a practice of getting up early, spending just a little bit of time. It can be even 5 minutes, which again, if someone had told me that sort of pre-children, I would have said, what? Like, what can you accomplish in 5 minutes? But now I know that it can be a lot. And trying to do it with some amount of frequency. as much time as possible outside. So it's not quite those, long, quiet hikes that my husband and I had pre-children. It's more kind of stop and go and feeding Cheerios and getting the water bottle back out for the 100th time and all of that. But there's still a certain amount of quiet that comes from being outside that's just very different than doing anything indoors. And then a thing that I really love to do now that I'm trying to do at least once a month and sometimes even more often is floating. So for those of you that haven't heard of that, it's also called sensory deprivation, which I think is such a kind of a yucky term for such a beautiful thing. But you basically lay in, it's just like a big box, and it has a door, and you get in it, and it's about 8 inches of warm water, body temperature water, with 800 pounds of Epsom salt in it. So you float in it. There's no way you could roll over or anything dangerous. You're completely floating there, and you close the lid, and you wear earplugs, so there's no sound, no light. Your body eventually can't even really feel itself because the water is so silky and it's the same temperature as your skin. You don't feel anything, under your bottom or anything because you're floating. You're not like laying on a bed or anything. And then of course there's no taste. And that is something I crave. I love doing it. I get some of the best insights of my life. Sometimes it sounds a little, this is getting a little crazy, Jamie. We just met and I'm crying and telling you all my crazy stuff.
That's
but
okay.
Sometimes
I open people up.
I will get in there and I will literally just start talking. So sometimes I stay totally quiet, but sometimes I actually talk. And there's something about the talking, physically moving my mouth and making sounds, that I am able to tease out questions I have or problems I'm going through or a situation I can't quite figure out. I'm able to just be sort of half in my own mind, but half in this quiet space with the universe. And it is so powerful. And floating is, popular enough that certainly most big cities have them. We live in Rochester, which is a small city, and there's a float place here. So for anyone that has heard of it or is thinking about it, I highly recommend it. I think it's an even deeper experience than meditation. It can be scary at first. It took me about 5 times before I actually liked it. And then the 6th time I got it and it clicked. And now it's almost like addicting because it's so peaceful and I leave kind of so, just so quiet in my soul, which, living in 2021 with cell phones and screens and businesses and kids and traffic and all of the stimulation we have, that quietness in the soul is a superpower. And I'll go back to what I said in the beginning, that it's available to all of us. You don't have to be smart or wealthy or well-connected or anything. Getting quiet is something that we can all do wherever we are. We could all just pause it right now and just be quiet for 5 minutes and experience that superpower. And that's probably my favorite thing about it, is that it's available to everyone wherever we are.
You're making me remember. I've done salt floats or sensory, whatever you call it, and they are incredible. They're trippy in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It takes you, if the first 20 minutes I'm just jitters, and then all of a sudden it's over, and all these thoughts come to me after that I had in the moment. I don't know if that makes any sense, but It's just this you go away. It's almost, I guess it would almost be akin to managed psychedelics in some way, right? You literally kind of trip out, right? For me it does, but we haven't done it in 4 or 5 months, maybe. I guess maybe even more than that. I think about it, might have been pre-COVID, but it's time to get back to it because it is an incredible experience.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
Schedule one.
I'm sorry?
Schedule a session.
Well, for those out, like you said, True Rest is a chain of them. It's just, they're in every city now. It's as much as a Massage Envy or any of these places, or there's local places that do it as well. So no, I'm definitely going to do that. All right, let's jump over to I had a couple other things, but in respect of your time here and without getting too much deep, let's jump over to the one sheet questions. We'll go pillar by pillar, learn a little bit more about you, and maybe dig in here and there on that as well. And then we'll wrap up at the end. So if you're ready.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So horizontal income, let's start with this first pillar. What currently is your yearly horizontal income, and how many lines is that?
Yeah, so my husband and I have built a real estate portfolio over about the last 10 years, and I'm sure there's people of all stripes listening to this, all the way from Ascend and Emerge to kind of the rock stars of GoBundance. But I want to throw out a message for maybe people who are earlier in that trajectory to say that it can be done. So you might hear in my story that I'm a physician or those sorts of things. So we actually built our entire real estate portfolio before I ever worked as a physician. So I had the heavy weight of medical school and residency and 3 young children, and we were able to build our portfolio. So it's hard work, it takes a lot of literal hard work, long hours, hustle, networking, but very possible. So today we personally own about $25 million of real estate. So if you kind of count each of our individual properties, we have about 100 streams of income. We've created a property management company and a number of other businesses around that. So it's a little hard for me to kind of wrap my head around our income, because some of it's cash flow and some of it's equity and some of it's debt pay down. But we're in a position today where we have several $1 million of income each year, which is just mind blowing. It's what we've worked for so long, and now we're getting to experience it all through the power of real estate investing and leverage.
I love it. I'm going to guess that puts you above a 100%er as far as income to expense ratio, unless you're very lavish, which you might be.
Yeah. So the way we think of it is our rental home portfolio provides for all of our needs. So our own mortgage, childcare, health insurance, vacations, living expenses, those sorts of things. And then everything else that we do is just to fuel growth. So our property management company, the additional investments that we're getting into, because we really have a vision of changing property management and bringing the values that we have in business to property management, which is kind of a young industry. So my husband comes from technology, I come from medicine, very well-established industries, clear standards of excellence. And property management is a baby industry as compared to those. There's very few national standards or governing bodies, or even large property management companies in the whole country. There's a small handful of them, but not many. And we see ourselves in that space. We see ourselves bringing the values of making a rental living experience as good or better than a homeowner experience. That's what people want these days for all sorts of demographic reasons. And so we could stop and just live off of our passive income, but we have this desire for more, this desire to contribute, to change an industry and to kind of leave our mark on the world. And I think it's surprising to both of us, again, coming from technology and medicine. I think we thought that would be the path for us, but this is where the universe has kind of guided us. And we're able to take the excellence from those industries and then work with folks in those industries who are looking for their own sources of passive income and take our expertise and help those people. And so we just continue to grow because of a desire to contribute.
I like that. Yeah, there's never a destination, right? Wherever the destination, right, the goalpost moves. And that's what you were saying. I always say that people say, oh, I want a private jet one day. It's like, well, no, you don't want a private jet. You want to become the person that needs the private jet, right?
That's exactly right.
Whatever that is. So
that's exactly right. And that right there is why I love GoBundance, because people in GoBundance get that. And it's like a shorthand that we can say to each other, like, oh, I want the second home or the jet or the charity or whatever. But we all really know that what we want is the growth that comes with it.
That's it. Fulfillment. At the end of the day, fulfillment and purpose. So no, that's great. From a net worth perspective, what percentage would you say is real estate versus other assets that you might own? Is it like largely real estate with a couple of other things, or do you balance it out in any way?
Yeah, so we are basically 100% real estate and cash. So we stay liquid enough to have safety and continue to grow our portfolio, but 100% of our investments are in real estate. And then a growing portion of our net worth is the value of our businesses, but we are the largest customers of our businesses. So it's kind of hard to tease that out. Our businesses are just there to fuel growth.
Yeah, real estate related as well. So that all makes sense. Okay, let's jump over to age defying health. What does the daily diet and exercise routine look like for you right now?
Yeah, so I would say that's a big part of the reason I joined GoBundance, is that focus on the whole person or the whole woman, because that's an area that I do struggle with. For whatever reason, I'm very motivated to have a great relationship with my husband, with my children, to grow the business, to do well professionally. Health, even as a physician, I think it's easy for me to kind of set it to the side. And I know that that's not what I want. I know that I'm building this legacy with my children and future grandchildren and this business, and I want to be around to enjoy it. One thing that I have done in the past many years that I think has been very positive is implementing a regular practice of intermittent fasting. And I certainly don't describe myself as a vegan or a vegetarian, but pretty close. So I only eat meat a few times a month. I try to stay away from animal products. And those two things have been challenging changes, but very positive changes. And I find that it's kind of a positive feedback loop, that I feel better when I'm fasting. I feel better when I'm eating a plant-based diet. And so just kind of continuing on that path. And then I've had 3 children in the last 5 years. And a big part of the reason I want to stay healthy is that I want more children, and pregnancy and breastfeeding is very hard on the body. But most of our activity these days kind of centers around kids. And we have an almost 6-year-old, an almost 4-year-old, and then a 1.5-year-old. And so we're able to kind of do a little bit more with them, more hiking, swimming, doing some more outdoors things than we were when they were much littler. COVID has been really helpful with that we were not going to sit in a house for a year straight with 3 young children, but we also didn't necessarily want to be around other people because of the infection risk. So we basically have just spent the entire last, going on a year and a half now, just outdoors. We get the kids, they have continued to be in school, and we get them from school, and then we're just outdoors the rest of the time. And that I hope that that's a change that came to us kind of accidentally because of COVID, but that stays with us for years or decades to come, because it's been very good for us, and it's been very good for them. They sleep better, they behave better, the house doesn't get super messy. It's just kind of good for everyone. We just have to take a lot of showers. We're like always covered in dirt and sand and chlorine. And
chlorine is a big one for us too. Yeah, no, that's great. Like you said, there's some things that happen in COVID that it's like, actually, let's continue this. Like, again, life happening for you, not to you. So
exactly.
On this point, you mentioned, I want to kind of pause here for a second, because I think it would be, I don't know, with you being our first female guest, I think it would be remiss not to kind of dive in here for a second. You mentioned about, like when families decide to have kids, I mean, fun for the husband, right? But for the wife, you've got to go through massive changes in your body, which affects your emotions and everything else for this 9-month period. Then as soon as you go through this incredibly physical event of delivering a baby, that baby needs your body right away, right? There's just no break. This, we as men always cry about, the sleepless nights, but come on, it's nothing compared to what the mom has to do, especially if you're breastfeeding. How is that? Talk to us about the dynamics of being a very financially successful, business savvy, business successful woman, and the balance that you have to strike, or that you have struck, with being a mom and going through 3 pregnancies in 5 years with the plans to do 1 or 2 more. I can't imagine the challenges. I'm so glad I was born. I can't imagine a guy. I can't imagine going through what women go through, whatever, month to month. And then of course through pregnancy and all. I don't have the strength for it. So how do you find that balance, and what challenges, if any, are there in that as a woman? Like, speaking to the women out there, what challenges have you faced, and any thoughts on how you overcome that, or how you I don't know how you do it. So I'll let you kind of go on that.
That's an excellent question. That's probably the toughest question you've sent my way during this call. So I would say, to the women listening, and to the men too, give yourself grace. Give yourself grace. Know that we as humans are meant to live in tribes. We're meant to live with not just our romantic partners and our children, but our brothers and sisters and their children, and our parents and their brothers and sisters. And in modern society, most of us don't. And so we are living and raising children at a time that's probably harder than most parents in all of human history. We're very lucky that we don't have to worry about our children getting bit by snakes, or taken away by the lion, or dying of diarrheal illnesses or other things that some people in the world do have to struggle with, and certainly people in many generations before us did have to struggle with. But we have a new set of challenges, and it can feel like I have to go, or I'm so alone, or especially as you say for moms, that it's kind of a 24-hour job of either working all day or even just taking care of the kids all day. And then kids often need a great deal of care through the night as well. So it never stops, especially when they're very little, under say 1-year-old. So give yourself grace, and know that you are doing something that most humans in all of human history have not done. And then if you believe that that's the problem, think about ways that you can try to solve it. Maybe it is finding a mom friend that has a baby. Things that have been very helpful for me are pre-children, I only used Facebook to communicate with people I physically knew. And when I had my first baby, I struggled so much with breastfeeding. I just did not know what to do. I was getting a ton of help from my doctor, a ton of help from trained lactation professionals, and I still just could not figure it out. I had all these like tiny little questions. And that's when I discovered that you could go on Facebook and join groups of people you didn't actually know who had a common reason to be together. So I joined a breastfeeding moms group, and then I'm like, oh, if there's a group for this, I bet there's a group for scheduling vacations or a group for cooking healthy recipes or whatever comes to mind. And now I'm just in dozens and dozens of Facebook groups. And then, today I'm in in-person groups too, like GoBundance. But find a tribe, whether it's something on social media or a local thing in your area, especially now that some things are opening back up with COVID. Let your family know. If you have a sister or a cousin or a mom or whomever, let your family know, like, this is more lonely than maybe I realized, or don't forget about me just because I can't come to some things right now because I have a newborn at home or a little kid or those sorts of things. I think that my experience has been, when you tell people that you want them, they will be there. They just need to be reminded. We all kind of get sucked into our own vortexes and maybe forget that, oh, my mom friend over here is struggling because she has some little ones at home, or I haven't heard from her lately, but that's not because she doesn't want to hear from me. She's just really busy. So you reach out, and then if you're listening, reach out to your mom friends. And then I have been very lucky that my husband is a very dedicated father. So he never knew his father. His story's kind of similar to mine. I never really knew my mother. He never really knew his father. He also had a very good mother who struggled with some health issues of her own, but loved him a great deal. And so we came into our marriage with the belief that we knew how important parental love was, but we also knew how challenging it was to only have one of our two parents. And that was not what we wanted for ourselves and for our own children. So he's been right alongside me, waking up in the middle of the night, even when I was breastfeeding, even to say, I know that I can't breastfeed the baby, but can I get you a glass of water? Can I get you a snack? Can I get you a blanket? Maybe I can change the diaper, if I had to be awake for 20 minutes, if he could take the last 5 minutes of getting the baby back down to sleep, or kind of turning on the lights, turning off lights, all the little things that happen, then that could be very helpful. And across the night, that might be an extra 30 minutes of sleep that I would get. And having a very good communication with each other, especially as our children got older and we're no longer breastfeeding, that I could say to him, I really need sleep tonight, or he could say to me, I really need sleep tonight, or even just during the day, I really need your help with the kids right now, or I really need you to take care of this. And we both know that we have big goals for our family. We want a big family, and we know that that's a marathon that we're going to have to run together. And we want both of us to be very interested in continuing to run that marathon. And so we don't want either of us to ever get to a feeling of like, this is too hard with, say 1, 2, or 3 young children at home. I don't want more children. We don't want either of us to ever say that to the other one. So we're both just always checking in with each other of, how are you doing? Is there anything I can do to help? We know that we have to run this household together. Blessedly, as our incomes have gone up, we've been able to hire a great deal of household help to take care of some of the things like laundry and cleaning and the lawn, so that we're able to focus more on spending quality time with our children. Even when we do those things ourselves, we make sure to include our children, especially as they are getting a little bit older now, that they understand that it takes effort to run a household. Someone has to put the laundry away, someone has to mow the lawn, someone has to take care of the pool, and they're a part of that. So that's kind of a ramble there, but modern day parenting is very hard. It requires a lot of people, and it requires a great deal of communication and kind of putting a big heaping helping of grace on top of that. And just love your kids, right? Like if anyone has listened to my story, it's that my childhood was really tough. We were really poor, like didn't have clothes, like often didn't have food, had very poor housing conditions. My father struggled with substance use, lots of challenges. And the reason I am who I am today is that I had those really good years with my aunt and uncle, and they loved my brother and I. And we had those really good years with my dad, and my dad showed that he loved me a great deal. And that can overcome a whole lot of the other things. So even if you yell at your kids, or you're not spending as much time with them as you want, or you don't have the picture perfect birthday for them because you're too busy or whatever, that stuff goes by the wayside. If you love your children and they know that you love them and they know that they're very special to you, a whole lot of the kind of day-to-day minutia just all takes care of itself, and kids grow up very okay.
There's so many things in there that that are, there's a story of tribe here that you mentioned. That you were unintentionally placed in the right tribe from the ages of 3 to 8, and you realize later how much that served you, and you become, it sounds like, very intentional with placing yourself around the right people, or very intentional with finding the right tribes. I think that's a major lesson here. So I appreciate you sharing that. And I think, on the mom part of it, and giving yourself grace, that's so true. I know my wife struggled with it, and we're so close still to a generation, I think, that has a traditional view of the man and woman in a relationship, or as a mom and a dad. And the woman's role or the mom's role is to be mom. And when she's not being mom and she's building a business, she's being a badass, there could be a sense of guilt with that. I've seen that with my wife, at least. I'm sure many women share that. Maybe some don't, if they had a more enlightened upbringing, or a little bit more of a progressive background from their family's perspective. But my hope is that as we go, you as a parent of children, and them as parents of children, that it's not so expected that there's, a role for you to play, or a role for me to play as a father, or whatever the case may be. Because I think that contributes a lot to what a lot of women go through when they're trying to balance mom and business and everything else. And I love how you said it. Your business is your 4th child right now. That's a great way of looking at it. You have a lot of people you're responsible for. So I love that you take that on.
Yeah.
So here's what I'm going to do.
Speak very quickly to the dads. One of the things that I actually learned from Tony Robbins, despite my great education as a psychiatrist, I actually learned this from Tony, of all sources. And it's been really powerful in my relationship with my husband. And it's that masculine energy is very focused, right? You have to hunt the lion, and you need to focus on that to bring food home. And feminine energy is very diffuse. You need to kind of watch that the kids are over there, but also be kind of looking in that bush, and also kind of thinking about, there's a fire over here that maybe I'm boiling some water on. And neither one is better or worse than the other. They're just very different. Yeah. And in today's world, that often means, not always, but often means that a masculine figure is at work, or even they're at home, but they're maybe working on a project around the house, or kind of doing something with one of the children, or something like that. And the feminine partner is just thinking about everything, that what are we going to have for dinner? And, oh, there's a soccer game coming up, but tomorrow this kid needs to have their dance clothes ready. And, oh, this weekend is a family member's birthday party. And that is heavy on women. And then add on that women don't have their sisters and their aunts and all of the things that we had many, many generations ago to kind of carry that load together. It can be very challenging. And so one of the things that my husband has done, that once we've kind of learned this concept from a Tony event several years ago, is starting each day asking me, what is most on your mind, and what can I take off of your plate? And we run a business together. So sometimes that's, hey, I need you to take care of this thing in the business. But if let's assume that the partners have 2 separate jobs or 2 separate businesses or whatever, but taking even a few things off of your partner's plate is going to give her so much more peace and energy, and the ability to know that you have that you're taking care of getting someone to soccer and making sure the dance clothes are in the bag for tomorrow, and you're going to take care of the birthday present. So she can focus on some other things. Maybe one of those things might be herself. And I promise you, if a woman has time to focus on herself, that's probably going to come back to the masculine partner, because she's probably going to desire to be with him. So just kind of thinking about the differences in attention, and the weight of the diffuse attention that feminine energy typically has, and thinking, what can I do to get some things off of her plate, and doing so in a very loving, serving way. And I think we all know that what you put out into the universe often comes back. So don't put it out with an energy of, oh, I'm going to do these things for her so I can get something from her that I want. Put it out with, I love her. And I know that she has 999 million things on her mind. And the way my mind works is just more naturally focused on one or two. So I'm going to take some things off of her plate, give her some space to be her own beautiful self, to have her own beautiful energy. And it's probably going to be good for all of us.
And meeting Nick on this podcast, but also in Atlanta, he lives and breathes that. Talked about you, talked about how powerful you are, not only in the relationship you have as a couple, but also in the business itself, and how much of a driving force and how much he's behind you. It's really, really cool to see the dynamic of your relationship from both sides now. So appreciate that. And you just made me realize this diffuse energy that you mentioned. In with my GoPod, we always talk about our wives and what's their love language, and like every woman that I know, acts of service is in there. And so,
yes.
So to your point, taking something off acts as that act of service, speaks to love, as long as it's not tactical, like you said, not looking to give to get, but just looking to love and give. I think that's great advice. So let's do this in the interest of time and everything, because I mean, your story is incredible. I'm glad we got through as much as we did, but I could probably go another hour. I'm not going to do that. Probably both have calls come up, but I'm going to jump to a question from the GoBundance card game here.
Awesome. That's super fun.
We'll wrap up. So the question is, what is the hardest thing you have ever done in the name of personal growth?
Ooh.
A lot of hard things you've done. So you may have already touched on 8, but
yeah, that's a good one. We talked about some things that, maybe I didn't necessarily do, but the universe kind of provided to me, like going to medical school, kind of that clarity I had around my relationship with my father, really being intentional in finding a partner and then building a marriage with him that is the adult life that I want. If I had to say the one that's been the hardest and it's ongoing, that is going to continue to go on until the day I die, it's shedding my ego. Anytime I feel it, and we all have it. So for some people, it's really big. For other people, it's maybe a little smaller. But we all have that feeling of, for me, it manifests as things like, well, I disagree with that person, so I must be better. Or, well, my business is bigger, or my kids are cuter, whatever. And it does not serve me. It never has. Maybe when I was like 12 or 13, maybe when we're all like 12 or 13, we need like a few years of it so that we can separate from our parents and find our way in the world with our own identity. But I would posit that in adulthood, it does not serve any of us. It's a human tendency. It's a survival mechanism. We all want to make sure that we survive, make sure that we are in a group of people and that we have some type of, belonging in that group so that we're not left in the savannah to die by ourselves. But really, it doesn't serve us. Really, we need to just remind ourselves, or I need to remind myself, that that's a survival mechanism. It's not the best way that I can use my brain. Anytime I feel it, I've trained myself when I feel it that I have to stop everything that I'm doing and think about either something I'm grateful for or something I love about that person. So if I find myself comparing myself to someone, I have to say, nope, that's my ego. That's a survival mechanism. That does not serve me. I choose not to participate in that. And I'll tell you what, instead of comparing myself to Jane, I'm going to stop and think about, man, that one conversation I had with Jane, she taught me about XYZ or gave me this new insight. And I really appreciate her in my life. And she has given me something of herself. And I'm so grateful for her. And just training myself to do that over and over and over. It's not quite a reflex. I think with more years of practice, it will be. But that's hard for me because I don't even want to give an excuse. It's hard for all humans. And it's hard for me. And the more I can let go of my ego, the more I grow as a person and the more I grow in my relationships. And I'm able to be in real relationship with other people and experience that, because that is the most beautiful thing in the world. Being better than someone or smarter than someone or whatever, that's like 1 on a scale of 1 to 10. Real genuine relationship is 10. And you can only get there by shedding the ego.
I said at the beginning of this interview, this will be the best women's interview that we've had, but I'll got to be honest with you. This has probably been one of, if not the most powerful interview I've done as I've been hosting this podcast. And I mean that with no BS. That was an incredible story. Had no idea the depth coming into it, and your ability to kind of tell your story and place lessons along the way and teach as you go. I guess a mishmash of, what you went through, your training in the medical profession, and then just who you are today and what you just described now about shedding the ego and the struggles with that. Really powerful. I honestly, thank you. Thank you so much for pouring so much into this interview. If somebody wanted to learn more about you or Black Swan, how could people find out more about you?
Yeah, so our website is blackswanteam.com. You can find out about us there, sign up for our newsletter. We have a Facebook group where we teach other people about investing at Single Family at Scale on Facebook. And I'm always reachable via email too. As I mentioned, I love to connect with people. My email is elaine@blackswanteam.com. And I just want to say, I know I said it in the beginning, but I want to say it again. The people in GoBundance are some of the most just amazing people I have met. And I think it really comes from a desire to really connect with each other, to really serve each other, to really get to know each other, to grow together. The women in GoBundance are just amazing. I'm happy that I'm here and able to be the first woman interviewed, but there are dozens of just amazing women in there, and I look forward to the time that they can share their stories and their voices. I have been so impacted by being in relationship with those women, and I know they have a ton to share with this audience.
Amen. Amen. It's been incredible for me on the men's side as well. Excuse me. And it's been great getting to know you. So thank you again for all of what you provided us today, and look forward to connecting more in the future.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jamie.
Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let us know down in the comments, and make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you can be informed on the next episode and other content right here on this channel. Thank you.